Let me open. I can't even open the door here, guys. How am I going to squeeze my butt in here? Okay, I can fit myself in this cell, and it is creepy. Let's have a look up. 1 meter wide, 2.5 meters deep, and 10 meters high, no light. Today, May 24th, 2025, I am taking you inside of one of the most infamous sites in Toronto, the Don Jail. Guys, I am entering the Don Jail, built back in the late 1850s by William Thomas, who designed it. He was also responsible for designing St. Michael's Cathedral, as well as St. Lawrence Hall. And the Don Jail did not open until 1864. I am in the rotunda here. And this is my first time inside of the Don Jail. And the old Don Jail, where I am now, was open from 1864 until 1977, when it was closed down due to its inhumane conditions. But the east new wing that was constructed back in the mid-1950s, which is on the northeast side of this original jail, remained open until 2012. And the Don Jail had 34 executions from the time it opened. And the Don Jail, and I'm going to head downstairs here to have a look at that bar there. The Don Jail, in fact, had the last execution in Canada back in December of 1962, when Robert Turpin and Arthur Lucas were executed back to back. And they were executed in their prison uniform, blue pants, gray shirt.
Up to 3. It was intended for 1.
And in 1962, they were the last inmates who were hung here. And they were hung in the gallows. And the gallows were, in fact, a washroom converted into a gallows. And in 1962, folks were protesting outside of the Don jail because when the Don jail opened back in 1864, it was considered progressive. And it was actually called a palace for prisoners. And at the time, it was considered progressive because it was more about reform. But then it turned into a hell. The living conditions inside of the Don jail, which originally was meant to house 180 inmates, ended up housing close to 700 inmates. And I'm standing outside of the cells here in the basement. The building is currently owned by Bridgepoint Health, and it's used as an administrative building. And right in front of me here is the prisoner cells in the basement of the Don jail. And I will be entering this cell here. And the conditions in the cells were so deplorable. They are 1 meter deep, 2.5 meters wide. Let me open. I can't even open the door here, guys. How am I going to squeeze my butt in here? Okay, I can fit myself in this cell, and it is creepy. Let's have a look up. 1 meter wide, 2.5 meters deep, and 10 meters high. No light, no windows. And these cells were meant to hold 1 inmate. But the conditions inside the Don jail became so deplorable and over capacity that in fact 3 inmates would be inside this cell. Can you believe that? 1 meter by 2.5 meters inside this cell. 3 inmates would be in here, and they would be staying in hammocks, one on top of the other. And because of the plumbing situation, which there wasn't much of a plumbing situation when the prison jail opened, they would use buckets, so you can imagine the stench. And as the jail became more deplorable, that was really creepy. As the jail became more deplorable with roach infestation and rats. Folks who were not inside of the prison fought for the rights of the inmates, such that they wanted the Don jail closed down, and in 1977 it did close down.
All you have is a bed, a bucket, and food.
And like I said earlier, the final execution of inmates
That's the only time that the door gets open.
happened here back in 1962. And right here, guys, is the segregation cell.
And then in 70s,
And inmates would be put inside of this segregation cell. There would be no light, complete darkness.
So this is their own, very own. They get their own.
So this segregation cell,
all theirs.
I would say,
It was going to be
is about the same size as the prisoner cells that I just observed.
I don't think there's a single bit of light.
And the door would be closed on them. It would be completely dark in here. Let me ask the lady. Can you close the door on me so I can have a feeling of what it'd be like in here? So this is what the inmate would face when they were put in the segregation cell with this wooden door. Thank you so much. My goodness.
And then in 1977.
And I am in the basement level, guys, of the Don jail. This room here is a very interesting shape. And these rooms have been turned into administrative rooms here. What did this room used to be? This used to be the kitchen? Thank you so much. So above me there is the glass floor in the rotunda. And one of the people here has just told me this area here used to be the kitchen. And let's go check out the gallows, where 34 inmates were executed. And if you're interested, check out the Boyd gang. Very interesting story about the Boyd gang in the Don jail. And I'm going to be entering the gallows here. And not only were the conditions deplorable for the inmates, where they had no telephones, no lawyers' rooms, laundry facilities. A lot of violence took place here as well. And inmates were only meant to be here for a short time. This was basically a holding jail for those arrested for crimes. But often inmates would be here for 3 months. And some much longer than that. To the gallows. Let's go upstairs. And there is the inside of that window from the outside. And the conditions were so poor that when inmates who were doing pretrial custody here, judges would give them credit for spending a day in the Don jail, and they would be credited 3 days for every 1 day spent in the Don jail. And the 2 men who were executed, Robert Turpin and Arthur Lucas, back to back. This is the gallows here where executions took place. And Robert Turpin was 29 years old. And his crime was that he committed a robbery in the East End of Toronto, in which he stole around $630. And upon his robbery, he jumped into his truck and a police officer chased after him. There was a gun battle in which the officer was killed. And then Arthur Lucas, who was 54 years old from Detroit, was a pimp and a hired killer. And he was convicted of murder, the murder of a U.S. prosecution witness. And both of them were the final executions in Canada.
That's the Gallows room. So I'll do the thing again because I know some people missed the first part of it. So 710 people were executed in Canada, 34 of them on this campus.
And I want to get inside of the gallows where the final executions took place.
On the days of execution, people would stand on the rooftops.
And there is
So they decided to bring the executions indoors.
Arthur Lucas from Detroit
They gutted them and they built the
and
gallows.
Robert
And
Turpin.
even though the gallows are gone, when you step in the room, you can see where they used to be.
And they were declared dead 16 minutes after they were hung. And their hands were tied behind their backs. Their ankles were bound together. They were in their prison uniform. And a white cloak was put over both their heads. Nooses wrapped around their necks. And this is where they were executed. And the man who did the execution was paid $500. And near the end of his life, he stated that he regretted ever executing anybody. I'm getting really creeped out here in the gallows. Just the history inside of here, can you imagine? And apparently Arthur and Robert were both pretty accepting of their fate. They were peaceful and quiet. And the folks outside were not so peaceful. There was a death watch outside of the jail. And let's go check out this side here.
Canada and then went to war and stole the shooting gun and brought that back. And so basically,
and this jail is now a administrative office, so a lot of the cells on the upper floor have been turned into offices.
Well, that from there, this was called Death Row 1.
And this one here is the executive boardroom.
I'm not sure if it was Death
And
this was here.
there is the rotunda. There's that glass floor that is the ceiling for the kitchen, the Don Jail kitchen at one time.
Okay. They actually covered up the floor. It just became a test.
And this building is said to be haunted because when the Dawn Jail first opened, there was a female wing and a male wing. And in the female wing, a female prisoner in the 1890s used sheets to end her life, and the guards are said to see the ghost of her. Apparently she has haunted the Dawn Jail since she ended her life here back in the 1890s. And she is known as the Lady of the Dawn. And guards that have seen her say she appears very angry, and she is in a white gown. And there were a number of inmates waiting for their trials who did end their lives inside of here, as well as inmates getting murdered by other inmates. Just fascinating. And surprisingly, a couple of inmates, or I'm not sure about the number of inmates, but apparently some inmates were very sad to see the Dawn Jail close, if you can imagine. And back in 2007, Bridgepoint Health, which is a hospital who now owns the Dawn Jail, when they were surveying the site, they located 15 bodies, or the remains of 15 prisoners. On the grounds, and it was literally an unmarked grave, and it was of prisoners or inmates who had been executed between the 1800s and early 1900s. And let's get a look here of the bars and the wood.